In July 2025, an 1,800-acre corn and soybean operation in central Iowa lost its operating line. The farm had been in the family for 3 generations. The crop was perfect, standing in the field, looking good, on pace for 190 bushel corn. The bank pulled the line anyway, not because of yield, not because of poor management, not because the farmer missed a payment. They pulled it because he was $147,000 negative in mid-season, and the credit committee flagged him as overextended. The crop would not come off until October. The payment structure did not care. He sold out in September, before harvest, at a loss. That story is not an outlier anymore. It is the new normal. And if you are running a commodity operation on an operating line, you need to understand what actually happened to him. Because the same force is running under your operation right now, whether you see it or not. Here is what most farmers still think. If the crop is good and the yield is there, the year is fine. That was true for 40 years. It is not true in 2026. Banks do not underwrite yield anymore. They underwrite cash timing. Cash timing is where farms are breaking. The villain here is not the banker. It is not even the interest rate. It is the liquidity gap. The space between when you spend money and when you get paid. And for most row crop operations, that gap is now 8 to 10 months long, fully financed with no margin for error. The Iowa operator did not lose his farm because he planted the wrong crop. He lost it because he was underwater from April to October, and the bank measured his risk in June. Here is the sentence you need to hear. From the bank's perspective, every extra acre you plant is another month they are exposed, not another dollar they earn. That rewrites everything. In the next 15 minutes, you will see the 3 numbers lenders are actually stress testing. Why adding acres now increases risk instead of reducing it, and what the smartest farmers are doing in 2026 that looks like retreat but functions like survival. And if you are carrying more acres than you can fund through the gap, this will be the most important 15 minutes you watch this year, because the farms that make it to 2030 will not be the ones that planted the most in 2026. They will be the ones that had cash in July when everyone else was on the phone with their lender. Let's start with why the system worked for so long. Because it did work, until it didn't. The Iowa farmer made the same decisions his father made, the same decisions that built that farm over 3 generations. He expanded when margins got tight. He financed inputs in spring. He sold in fall. Those decisions weren't reckless. For 40 years, they were correct. Operating credit sat at 3 to 4%. Input costs were stable and predictable. Banks underwrote on an annual cycle and renewed lines after harvest. You borrowed in March, planted in April, harvested in October, sold in November, and renewed in January. The gaps were 60 days, maybe 90. Short enough that nobody was nervous. Subsidies and crop insurance created Even in a bad year, you had a payment coming. Risk was real, but bounded. Under those conditions, when costs per acre went up, the logical response was to add more acres. Spread the fixed costs. Rent the neighbor's ground. Push from 1,200 acres to 1,800, then to 2,500. That wasn't greed. That was mathematics. The Iowa farmer did exactly that. He went from 600 acres to 1,800 over 15 years. Steady expansion, good yields, no disasters. He was doing what every extension agent, every equipment dealer, every banker told him to do. And it worked. Until 2022. Because between 2020 and 2025, 3 things changed. Operating credit went from 3% to 8%. Input costs didn't just go up, they became volatile. Fertilizer tripled, then dropped, then spiked again. You couldn't model the year anymore. And here's the killer. Banks stopped underwriting on annual results. They started stress testing mid-season liquidity. That Iowa farmer. In the old system, the bank wouldn't have cared that he was negative $147,000 in July. They knew the crop was coming in October. The relationship was annual. In 2025, the credit committee ran a liquidity stress test in June. When his line hit 89% utilization with 4 months until revenue, they flagged him. Not because he was failing, because he was exposed. And that same stress test is running on your operation right now. Let me tell you what actually killed that Iowa operation. Here is the month-by-month breakdown. In March, he pre-bought fertilizer for $42,000, financed. In April, he bought seed, chemicals, and fuel, $38,000. His line balance was a negative $80,000. From May through August, he spent on herbicide, maintenance, labor, final nitrogen, and pre-harvest costs, another $67,000. By mid-August, the total draw was $147,000. Revenue was zero. His operating line limit was $165,000. He reached 89% utilization in July, 4 months before harvest. The credit committee asked, what happens if he needs another draw? What happens if harvest is late? What happens if the price drops? What happens if there is an equipment breakdown? The answer was he was overextended. The line maxed out before the crop came off. They pulled the line in July, not in October. He could still have paid in July, unless they forced liquidation immediately. This is the exact moment most farms fail. Not at harvest, not after a bad year, but right here in mid-season, when the math quietly flips against them. That's the liquidity gap. On paper, he would have been fine. Projected revenue, $390,000. Projected costs, $342,000. Net, $48,000 positive. A decent margin. But the bank does not underwrite the annual margin anymore. They underwrite the deepest point in the red. $147,000 underwater for 8 months. That is the number that killed him. This is mid-season underwriting. And it is the force-breaking commodity farms in 2026. Banks are not asking if you are going to be profitable in November. They are asking 3 different questions. First, what is your maximum negative cash position, and how long does it last? That is when you are most vulnerable. That is when a single bad event turns into a margin call. Second, what is your mid-season renewal risk? If we pull your line right now, can you cover the balance with liquid assets? Most commodity operators cannot. Fully leveraged. Land equity, sure. But no liquidity. Third, cash timing and certainty. A farmer with 3 income sources hitting in May, August, and November is lower risk than a farmer with 1 income source in October, even if the October farmer's total revenue is higher. Here is the sentence that changes everything. The bank does not make money when you produce more. They make money when you survive the gap without defaulting. Your incentive is bushels per acre. Their incentive is months of exposure minimized. Those incentives are completely opposed. The 2,000-acre operation has bigger revenue potential, but also a bigger liquidity gap. More dollars at risk, longer time with 0 cash flow, higher absolute exposure. Scale used to reduce risk by spreading fixed costs. Now it concentrates risk by extending the gap. The smartest farmers in 2026 are not trying to maximize revenue. They are trying to minimize the gap. 60 miles south of that Iowa operation, there is a farmer who made different choices in 2024. He ran 900 acres. In January 2025, he dropped 300 acres. He did not renew the leases. People thought he was failing. He was not. He was doing math. No new equipment, no new subsidies, no yield miracles. He simply removed acres that only worked when everything went right. Those 300 acres required $74,000 in operating capital. They were the furthest fields, 22 miles out. Rented ground, marginal soil. In a good year, they would net $32 an acre after rent. In an average year, $18 an acre. In a bad year, they lost money. $74,000 deployed in April. Revenue in November. 7 months underwater on acres that only worked in perfect conditions. He cut them. His operating line requirement dropped from $192,000 to $118,000. His maximum negative position dropped by 38%. But here is what he did next. He added cow-calf pairs on 120 acres, 30 head. Those calves sell in May and again in September. The May income was $16,000. The September income was $22,000. Total $38,000 before the grain harvest. Look at what that did to the liquidity gap. Instead of being $118,000 negative from April to October, he is now $118,000 negative in April, $102,000 negative in May, $74,000 negative in September. Settled in October. His maximum negative position stayed at $118,000, but the duration fell from 7 months to 1 month. The bank's exposure window collapsed. His risk profile collapsed. And his annual net income was almost identical to the prior year. He is producing less. He is earning the same. And he is surviving. If this feels uncomfortable, it should. Everything most farmers were taught to optimize is now working against them. Because farming in 2026 is not a production problem. It is a treasury problem. A 400-acre operation with 3 income sources, manageable debt, and cash flow spread across 8 months has a higher survival probability than a 2,000-acre operation with 1 commodity, 1 payment date, and a credit line at 87% utilization before planting starts. Scale used to mean strength. Now it means exposure. The operators who understand that are cutting acres that look productive but behave like traps. They are pruning down to what they can control, what they can fund through the gap, and what gives them more than one chance to catch cash. This is not retreat. This is refusing to play a game where the only winning move is perfect conditions for 8 straight months. Your grandfather did not farm every acre he could touch. He farmed what he could control. The farms that survived the 80s did not survive because they were the biggest. They survived because they had the lowest debt and the most flexibility. Shrinking is not just what saves the farm. It is what makes the farm inheritable again. The Iowa farmer who lost his operating line didn't tell his family until August. He spent 4 weeks trying to find another lender. There wasn't one. He liquidated before harvest. Equipment at auction. The land his family owned, 600 acres his grandfather bought in 1947, went to pay down the operating debt. 3 generations. Gone in 1 credit cycle. Not because he was lazy, because the model demands annual borrowing against future production, and eventually the gap gets too wide, or the timing breaks. The farmer who shrunk on purpose? He's still farming, and his son is coming back to the operation in 2027. Shrinking restored 3 things that scale had taken away. First, decision power. He is not starting every year $150,000 in the hole. If grain prices are bad in October, he can store. If a contract offer is weak, he can say no. When you are leveraged to the limit, you do not make decisions. You react. Second, time horizon. He is thinking 2 years out, 3 years out. He can plan succession. When you are managing a 12-month refinancing cycle, you cannot think past November. Third, resilience to variance. He is no longer binary. It is not good crop and survive or bad crop and liquidate. One bad event does not cascade into total failure. Here is the decision framework for your own operation. Ask yourself 3 questions. Question 1. What is your maximum negative cash position this year, and how many months does it last? If you are more than $100,000 underwater for more than 6 months, you are in the danger zone. Question 2. If your lender ran a stress test on you in June, would you pass? Not in November. In June, when you are at maximum draw with no revenue yet. They are already running that test. You just have not seen the results. Question 3. Are you farming acres you control, or acres you are gambling on with borrowed money? The credit system changed. The interest rate environment changed. The input cost structure changed. The only thing that has not changed is the advice: scale up, get efficient, add acres. But efficiency is table stakes now. Everyone is efficient. The margin is gone. Scale does not reduce risk anymore. It concentrates risk. What is left is cash timing, maximum exposure, and survival probability. The smartest farmers are not the biggest anymore. They are the ones who can say no. No to bad ground, no to bad terms, no to the treadmill that says you have to expand every year or die. Your farm does not have to be big to survive. It has to be fundable through the gap. It has to give you room to adjust. And it has to let you make decisions instead of just reacting to the calendar and the credit line. In 2026, winning is not the farm that looks best in October. It is the one that does not have to explain itself to the bank in July. That is what winning looks like now. Not the most acres, the most control. Not the highest revenue, the highest survival probability. Not the biggest operation, the one that lasts.